Once upon a time, in a distant village, there lived an old man named Kofi. Kofi wasn't wealthy, but he cherished his family deeply. He was a dedicated farmer, though he didn't own a farm of his own, working instead on other people's fields. Kofi always made sure his family had enough, despite their modest means. His wife, Amina, was a beautiful, kind-hearted woman who worked as a trader in the village market, selling fresh fruits and vegetables. Each morning, she would prepare her goods with a smile, supporting her family with her earnings. Kofi and Amina had 3 children, 2 boys and a lovely daughter. They were a close-knit family, their home filled with laughter and love. Each evening, after a long day's work, Kofi would come home, tired but content. His wife greeted him with a warm meal, and his children would run to embrace him. Together, they would share stories, laugh, and enjoy one another's company, finding joy in their humble life. Despite having many friends in the village, Kofi felt a growing distance from them as they grew wealthier. They began to avoid his company, unwilling to associate with someone so poor. Though saddened, Kofi reminded himself, "My family is all I need." One day, he decided to attend a large village gathering, hoping to reconnect with his old friends. Initially, they welcomed him, sharing food and laughter. But after the meal, one of them asked Kofi to gather and clean up the dishes because he was not as wealthy as them. Kofi felt humiliated, but did as they asked, returning home with a heavy heart. His wife noticed his sadness and gently inquired about it. Kofi shared the day's events, but reassured her, "No matter how others treat me, I'll always do my best for our family." Despite the harsh treatment from his friends, Kofi continued to work tirelessly for his family's sake, keeping his love for them as his source of strength. Kofi was respected in the village for his hard work and humility, known for his unwavering dedication despite not owning his own land. Often, the wealthier villagers took advantage of him, asking him to complete demeaning tasks, like washing their clothes or cleaning their houses. But he endured it all to provide for his family. One day, Kofi approached his wealthiest friend, Chief Obasi, hoping for work during the harvest season. Chief Obasi agreed and promised payment at the end of the season. When the harvest was complete, Kofi and his 2 sons had worked tirelessly. They approached Chief Obasi for their payment, but he only gave Kofi a portion, asking him to return the next day for the remainder. Though he found it strange, Kofi accepted it without complaint, hoping that tomorrow would bring the rest. The next day, Kofi returned, only to be greeted with unexpected warmth and generosity by Chief Obasi, who invited him to a lavish meal. After they had eaten, Chief Obasi made Kofi an intriguing offer. "There is a way to gain wealth without endless labor," he said, explaining that Kofi needed to meet an old wise man in the forest. The promise of riches was tempting, yet Kofi felt uneasy. Upon returning home, Kofi shared the unusual offer with Amina, who listened with concern. "Kofi," she advised, "we have always lived honestly. Quick riches can bring unexpected troubles." Kofi understood her concern but felt the lure of a better life was hard to ignore. That night he lay awake, contemplating the risks and potential rewards for his family. The next day, Kofi made his way to the forest's edge where he met the wise old man, a figure with a long white beard and wise eyes. The old man led Kofi to a clearing, marked with a circle of stones and symbols, and performed a ritual, blessing him with wealth. As Kofi left the forest, a small pouch of gold coins in his hand, his heart was a mix of excitement and dread. When he arrived home, his family was overjoyed at the sight of the gold. They celebrated, believing that life would change for the better. And indeed, Kofi's life did transform. His humble home filled with luxuries he had never known, and he became the talk of the village. But his wife, while happy, couldn't ignore a lingering unease about their sudden fortune. One evening, she turned to him and said, "Kofi, I am happy that..." The prosperity of Kofi and his family had become a constant topic of discussion in the village. People marveled at Kofi's sudden transformation, unaware that the real test of his choices and the price of his wealth still loomed ahead. As Kofi's riches grew, so did the attention from old friends who had abandoned him during his days of hardship. Now they eagerly flocked to his grand home, their admiration tinged with envy and suspicion. Every day they would bring gifts and heap praise upon Kofi, hoping he would reveal the secret behind his sudden fortune. One afternoon, as Kofi sat in his lavish living room, a group of these friends gathered around him. "Kofi, my friend," one said, leaning forward, "we're so proud of you. You've accomplished so much so quickly. Won't you share your secret with us?" Kofi smiled politely, but felt a pang of unease. He knew that revealing the source of his wealth could bring about dire consequences. "The gods have blessed me," he replied cautiously. "They saw my hard work and decided to reward me." His friends exchanged skeptical glances, not fully convinced. One leaned closer, saying, "Come now, Kofi, we're your friends. You can trust us. There must be more to it than just divine blessings." Kofi maintained his calm demeanor. "It is the truth. The gods have been kind to me. I cannot explain it any other way." Despite their persistence, he remained firm. He knew the secret of his wealth was tied to a dark ritual, one he didn't want to drag anyone else into. As time passed, his friends' eagerness waned. Frustrated by Kofi's reluctance, they began to distance themselves once more, whispering rumors and speculation about the true nature of his wealth. Kofi felt the strain of their suspicion weighing heavily on him. Despite his luxurious lifestyle, he often longed for the honest companionship of his impoverished past. He missed the simplicity of genuine relationships, even if they were tainted by hardship. Noticing Kofi's troubled demeanor one evening, his wife gently asked, "What is bothering you? I see worry in your eyes." Kofi sighed deeply, sharing his concerns about their friends' constant inquiries. "They do not believe it's just the gods' blessings," he lamented. "I cannot tell them the truth, but their questions never stop." His wife squeezed his hand. "We must stay strong, Kofi. We have each other, and that is what matters most. Let them talk. As long as we know the truth, we can face anything." With her reassurance, Kofi resolved to protect his family and the secret of their wealth. The return of his friends had reminded him that true loyalty and love could not be bought. But soon a messenger arrived with a chilling message from the old man in the forest. The next morning, Kofi made his way to the edge of the woods, where he found the old man waiting, his expression grave. "Kofi," he said, "the time has come for you to fulfill your part of the bargain. The gods demand a sacrifice." Kofi's heart sank. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked, voice trembling. "You must sacrifice your only daughter, Amina, to the gods. It is the price for the wealth you have received." "No, not Amina. I cannot do this." Kofi staggered back, horrified. "If you do not fulfill the gods' demand, you will lose everything, the wealth, your sanity, and your life. The gods will take back their blessings, and you will be left with nothing." The weight of the old man's words pressed down on Kofi. He could not bear the thought of losing Amina, the light of his life, but the threat was real. Torn between despair and fear, Kofi returned home, haunted by the old man's ultimatum. Days passed, and the burden grew heavier. On the 5th day, with his heart breaking, Kofi decided to follow through with the ritual, believing that somehow this terrible act might protect the rest of his family. His wife noticed his turmoil, but he could only shake his head, muttering that everything would be fine. That night, Kofi prepared the potion and the black oil as instructed by the old man. He found Amina playing in the yard, her laughter piercing his heart. "Amina, come here," he called softly. Trusting her father completely, she ran to him. "Drink this, my dear," he said, his voice breaking. Amina hesitated but took the drink. As she fell unconscious, Kofi carried her to the forest, each step feeling heavier than the last. In the clearing where the ritual was to take place, he laid Amina gently on the ground, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Amina," he whispered, just as he was about to proceed. A piercing scream shattered the silence. It was his wife, filled with desperation as she had followed him, suspecting something was terribly wrong. Villagers rushed to the forest, their torches lighting the darkness, finding Kofi kneeling over Amina. "What have you done?" his wife cried, her voice trembling with shock. The villagers quickly restrained him, as Amina was taken to the herbalist, hoping to undo the horror Kofi had almost inflicted. That night, Kofi was tied up in his compound, guarded by the villagers filled with a mixture of anger and pity. His wife wept, unable to comprehend how her loving husband could be driven to such a terrible deed. As dawn broke, the villagers gathered outside in Kofi's home, murmuring in disbelief. They could not understand how a man they had known all their lives could commit such a horrific act. "Kofi must face justice," one elder declared. Bound and surrounded by the villagers, Kofi was led to the king's palace. His head hung low with the weight of guilt pressing down on him. In the grand hall, the king sat on his throne, disappointment etched on his face. "Is this true, Kofi?" he asked, his voice echoing through the hall. Kofi, weakened by the ritual's backlash, fell to his knees and confessed. "Yes, my king, I was manipulated by Chief Asuka. He promised me wealth if I performed a ritual, but I didn't know it would lead to this." The king's eyes narrowed. "Find Chief Asuka. He must answer for his actions." But when the guards searched for Asuka, he had already fled the village, leaving behind the chaos he had orchestrated. "Kofi, you have committed a grave sin," the king said. "But since you did not take your daughter's life, I see the manipulation and fear that drove you. Your punishment will be severe, but your life will be spared. You will spend the rest of your days in prison, where your wife and children can visit you often, but you will work to atone for your actions." Kofi bowed his head, accepting his fate. "Thank you, my king," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The villagers dispersed, their hearts heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Kofi's wife returned to the herbalist's hut, where Amina was slowly recovering. She knew their family would never be the same, but held on to hope that they could heal. As Kofi was led to his prison cell, he felt a deep sense of regret. He had lost everything he had worked for, all for the promise of easy riches. The love and happiness of his family, once his greatest treasures, had been shattered by his choices. In his cell, Kofi vowed to spend the rest of his life atoning for his sins, hoping that one day his family might find it in their hearts to forgive him. Though he spent his remaining days in captivity, Kofi found some solace in knowing that his story served as a lesson. The love of family and the integrity of one's character were treasures far greater than any amount of gold. Kofi's tale spread throughout the village, a reminder of the dangers of greed and the true meaning of wealth. As he lay in his cell, he hoped his story would guide others away from the path he had taken.